When you talk horses for courses, the newest course of all is the synthetic courses that are around the country, especially here in North America, north of the border at Woodbine. Woodbine has a polytrack surface to go along with a world-class turf course. But Joe, for the sake of this discussion, we're talking about the polytrack here at Woodbine and polytracks around the country. Does the poly here play the same as the one you see at Arlington, your home track, or at Keeneland, where I like to play so much? Are all polys the same?
No, they're definitely not. Synthetic race courses in general, we've got different kinds. We've got the Tapeta, we've had Pro Ride, we've had other kinds over the course of time. The most popular is the poly track, but they all play a little bit differently. It's like any dirt track, any turf track. You have to pay attention to the racing day to day. Use the trends. There are some circumstances which are similar over synthetic racing surfaces, but on a day-to-day basis, you have to see how the racetrack plays and do play that into account when you're handicapping the races moving forward.
I know talking to the local handicappers here at Woodbine, they say that the track is very sensitive to temperature changes. When it's colder, the track will play much faster, that the poly track gets firmer and tighter and faster. I don't necessarily see that in tracking the races at Keeneland, though I know when they grate the track with the Gallop Master, at just 1 inch, it's going to play to speed. At 2, it could be neutral. At 3 inches deep, look for the closers. So maintenance at Keeneland is something I look for. Weather here at Woodbine they look for. At Arlington, are you looking for anything particular with the quirks of the poly track?
Well, I think when it's cooler outside, I think the times are actually slower at Arlington, and when it's faster is usually when it's warmer. So maybe a difference between Arlington's poly track and that at Woodbine. For the most part, JP, and I do the stats for the Arlington website week in and week out, I want to see inside trips. I want to see horses that are saving ground. You'll see horses make 3 wide sweeping moves at Arlington. You think they got horse, you think they're going to roll right by, they flatten out and run third or fourth. So pay attention to horses that may have been advantaged by the inside trips or disadvantaged by the outside trips moving forward. And we all know speed usually gets to the inside, so speed can be good at Arlington regardless of the temperature and the weather.
Now, there might be quirks from one poly or synthetic surface to another, but I think when you're looking at polytrack handicapping, 2 P's come in any racetrack, and that's performance and pedigree. Horses who've had good performances on the polytrack tend to repeat that. Horses who've run bad on it tend to repeat that as well, no matter how bad it is. And I think pedigree is very important. We now know enough races. We've seen enough races to know who the hot sires are on the polytrack, the good dam sires on the poly, and I think pedigree plays work no matter what circuit you're looking at on a synthetic surface.
Yeah, and going back to what you said about horses for courses, you'll see trainers lay horses off for 2 or 3 months in preparation for a synthetic track meet, whether that be going to Del Mar or going to Arlington from Hawthorne and so on and so forth. And back to the sires, yes, JP, we've had 5 or 6 years now of synthetic racing. You can tell which horses are going to perform well over it, supposedly based on their pedigree. I think a dangerous piece of information to have is a good polytrack sires list, and I think we're going to deliver one of those to the fans here tonight.
Yeah, I think you got one of those. Maybe we'll get a look at it later on. That's just one of the many surfaces that we handicap in tonight's Horses for Courses. The excitement of turf racing is what it's all about. The horses thundering down the stretch as you see over our shoulder. Joe, this is the kind of racing, the green, that gets everybody's blood pumping.
Yeah, I think if you talk to most handicappers, Jeremy, and you ask them what kind of races they like to handicap and bet on most, I think most people would say day-to-day it's grass racing.
One of those reasons is you get generally a better stock of horses on the grass. Not many tracks run cheaper horses on the turf. You will see it at some places and in some longer meets, but for most part, you're looking at maiden special weight, allowance, and stakes races on the grass.
Yeah, and for whatever reason, you get full fields on the grass because most trainers like to run their horses on the turf, and you get square prices. I mean, very rarely do you see that 4 to 5 favorite in a turf race. You're liable to get 5 to 1, 6 to 1, 8 to 1 prices on turf, not only on the win end, but in the gimmicks as well, which makes it very bettable and potentially lucrative.
Let's talk about some handicapping angles on the turf. Some things that you can't do on the grass. You really can't work out on the turf course at most racetracks unless you've got a turf card to work out for a stakes race. So training pattern and workouts and seeing a good turf work, in a lot of places, you're not going to get that opportunity. Let's talk about some of the things on grass that you look for in handicapping.
Well, I think for the most part in dirt racing, you want speed. You want a horse that's going to be close to the pace. Pace is always going to make the race, JP. So if there's a loose and lonely leader on grass, they have an excellent chance to win. But a lot of times, particularly in mile races where turn of foot is so huge, horses do come from off the pace a lot more often than they do on dirt tracks in a stalking position or even a closing position. You could see a horse win from 10 or 12 lengths off the pace in a grass race. That rarely happens on dirt.
Not all turf courses are the same. We're here looking at the Woodbine Racetrack, which is one of the longest ones you'll see in North America in terms of the length of the grass. You know, you're not lazy if you don't cut the grass in turf racing. You're just being very European. Kentucky Downs will have a very high and long turf course. We see some of these lush turf courses around the country. Then you have the putting greens, like at Sam Houston or Lone Star Park or even out on the West Coast. Horses handle the putting green that don't handle the long turf courses. So you kind of got to get to know your turf courses, and we included some of that in the study materials tonight.
Yeah, most definitely. And we talk about different styles of running on grass too. In sprint races on the turf, JP, I don't really put as much stock in pedigree because I think all horses like running on turf. So in sprint races, the races are over a lot more quickly. Pedigree means a lot more, particularly in the longer races, the marathon, the mile and a quarter, even the mile and an eighth. In a mile race, I'm looking for a horse with a superior turn of foot. In a race at a mile and an eighth, more so a mile and a quarter, more so a mile and a half, it's more about grinding. It's more about stamina. It's more about pedigree and stamina in that pedigree, particularly on the dam side.
And you talk about those turn-of-foot kind of horses. The short, compact, bottle rocket kind of horses really explode. They're built and look like turf milers. Hopefully we can identify some of those turf miler-type bodies. I think of Goldakova. It just jumps out. You look at that horse and you say, this is not a robust kind of statue like Rock Hard 10 or some horse like that. This is a little pocket rocket that just flies at a mile on the turf. And we've seen those kind of horses over the years just really excel at the shorter turf races.
And that's the kind of racing that gets your blood flowing and get you excited, is when a horse just turns over to the right lead and absolutely fires in a grass race. And you mentioned, Jeremy, some things about pedigree. Who's going to be a great turf sire? Well, usually they perform well on grass, but then you have your Rock Hard 10s, your Scat Daddies, your More Than Readies, your War Fronts, your Lemon Drop Kids, who may have made their name on dirt or another surface, who have turned out to be great turf sires. So it's more about the results of what they've thrown than the results of what they did on the racetrack.
Yeah, young sires on the turf, very hard to predict. Let it play out a little bit if you're going to be a pedigree handicapper on the grass. Joe, we talked about the different kind of courses. We talked about the different kind of distances. Final thoughts on turf racing. What makes it so special for you?
Well, I love it. And I don't care if it's a non-winners of two for $16,000 on grass or if it's the Grade 1 Arlington Million. I love handicapping turf racing. A lot of times, Jeremy, you'll see from 1st to 7th, 2 lengths separating the horses. Trips mean a lot. Go back and watch replays on turf. You're going to get a lot better trip notes on grass than you are on dirt because the horses are so closely bunched together and almost everybody fires at the end.
And because of that, from a betting standpoint, these are races that you like to spread out a lot of times in the multiple race wagers. Pick 3s, pick 4s. You want to use a lot of horses when playing grass races.